September 7th, 2022, 4:47 a.m. Kharkiv Oblast, northeastern Ukraine. Ukrainian 47th Mechanized Brigade begins assault. 2,000 soldiers, 40 tanks, 60 armored vehicles, NATO training, Western tactics. Objective: break through Russian defensive lines. Advance toward Izium. Sever supply routes. Collapse entire Russian front in northeast. This is main effort of Kharkiv counteroffensive. Everything depends on breakthrough. If 47th succeeds, Russians collapse. If 47th fails, offensive stalls. 2,000 soldiers, 90 minutes, 3 defensive lines. Mission begins now. The assault launches. No artillery preparation need, no warning. Just sudden overwhelming violence. Lead elements hit first Russian defensive line at 5:03 a.m. 16 minutes after starting. Russians are surprised, unprepared, positions undemanned. 47th Brigade punches through, doesn't stop to consolidate, continues advancing. Second defensive line, third defensive line. Momentum is weapon, speed is survival. Stop and die, advance and win. 47th advances, fast, north, violent, relentless. At 6:17 a.m., 90 minutes after assault began, Ukrainian forces have penetrated 3 Russian defensive lines, advanced 12 kilometers, seized 5 villages, destroyed 23 Russian vehicles, captured 200 prisoners. Russian defenses are collapsing. Command is panicking. Communications breaking. Units retreating without orders. This is breakthrough. This is what Blitzkrieg looks like in 2022. Fast, coordinated, devastating. And it's happening to Russians who thought their defenses were impregnable. This is IronBullet. And what 47th Brigade achieved in 90 minutes wasn't miracle. It was professional military execution against enemy whose defenses looked strong but weren't. Where Ukrainian forces used Western combined arms tactics to exploit Russian weaknesses that shouldn't have existed but did. Where speed and violence of action overwhelmed defenders who were spread thin, poorly led, and psychologically unprepared for competent assault. The question isn't whether 47th broke through. Territorial gains prove it. Question is how. How did Ukrainian forces penetrate 3 defensive lines in 90 minutes? Why Russian defenses collapsed so completely? And what this reveals about asymmetry between Ukrainian forces trained by NATO and Russian forces operating on Soviet doctrine that assumes mass compensates for competence. Official Ukrainian statements during offensive, cautious initially. Offensive operations ongoing, then increasingly confident as breakthrough develops. Significant territorial gains. Enemy withdrawing. By day 2, open celebration. Videos of Ukrainian forces liberating villages. Captured Russian equipment. Prisoners. Reality exceeded expectations. Offensive that was supposed to be difficult became rout. 47th Brigade proved Ukrainian forces could execute Western tactics successfully. This changed everything. Russians' minor tactical adjustments and panic. Regrouping to more favorable position. Translation: running away. By day 3, admission of disaster. Strategic withdrawal. Translation: front collapsed. Russians retreating 50 kilometers. Leaving equipment. Abandoning position. This is defeat. You can call it anything. It's still defeat. 47th Brigade inflicted it in 90 minutes that cascaded into days of Russian collapse. Stay with me, because the detail that explains breakthrough, how 47th penetrated 3 lines in 90 minutes, is going to show you that modern combined arms warfare is about tempo, about hitting enemy before they can react, about exploiting success immediately, about maintaining momentum until enemy breaks. Ukrainian 47th used these principles perfectly. NATO training taught them. Russian defenses couldn't handle it because Russian doctrine emphasizes positional defense, static lines, inflexibility. When Ukrainian forces breached first line and continued advancing without pause, Russian command couldn't adapt. Defenders expected time to regroup, didn't get it. Expected reinforcements, came too late. Expected orders. Command was confused. Everything Russians expected didn't happen. Everything Ukrainians needed to succeed happened. 90 minutes determined weeks of subsequent Russian collapse. Let's establish what 47th Brigade actually did. Minute by minute, line by line. Kharkiv Oblast, September 2022. Russian forces occupy since February. Built defensive lines. 3 layers. First line, forward positions. Trenches, observation posts. Second line, main defensive position. Fortified, artillery support. Third line, reserve positions. Fallback line if first 2 breached. Theory, 3 lines provide depth. Allow defense in depth. Attackers must assault each line sequentially. Takes time, takes casualties, allows defenders to reinforce, counterattack. Theory is sound. Practice failed catastrophically because theory assumes defenders are competent, alert, numerous. Russian defenders were none of these. Ukrainian 47th Brigade, NATO trained, combined arms tactics, armor infantry integration, artillery support coordination, speed and momentum emphasized, breakthrough doctrine, hit hard, hit fast, exploit immediately, don't pause, don't consolidate, advance until enemy breaks or you're stopped. This is Western mobile warfare, requires training, coordination, initiative at all levels. 47th had all 3, about to prove it. 4:47 a.m. Assault begins. No artillery preparations. Surprises weapon. Artillery fires only after assault elements cross line of departure. Suppresses Russian positions while Ukrainian forces close. Lead elements, tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles. Infantry follows. Engineers ready to breach obstacles. Everything coordinated. Moving together. Combined arms. 5:03 a.m. First Russian defensive line encountered. Forward positions, trenches, some Russians on alert, most sleeping, not expecting assault. Definitely not expecting assault is competent. Ukrainian tanks fire on the move, suppressing positions. Infantry dismounts undercover, assaults trenches, quick, violent, professional. Some Russians fight, most surrender or flee. First line breached in 8 minutes. This is where 47th does something unexpected. Doesn't stop, doesn't consolidate, just continues advancing. Leaves security elements to handle prisoners. Main force punches through, keeps momentum. 5:25 a.m. Second defensive line, main positions. This should be serious resistance. Is supposed to be prepared, fortified, artillery supported. Is none of these, defenders are confused. Communications with command broken. Don't know what's happening. See Ukrainian forces already past first line. Panic. Some try to defend, most retreat. Ukrainian forces assault with same speed, same violence. Tanks suppressing, infantry clearing, artillery hitting reserve positions. Combined arms synchronized. Russians can handle this tempo, accustomed to static warfare, not this fast-moving violence. Second line breached in 15 minutes. Again, 47th doesn't stop. Continues advancing. 5:52 a.m. Third defensive line. Reserve positions. Less organized resistance. Should be hardest. Ukrainian forces approach expecting serious fight. Find chaos. Russian command has lost control. Units retreating without orders. Others don't know whether to fight or flee. Artillery tries to support but doesn't know where Ukrainians are. Hits empty positions. Ukrainian forces exploit confusion. Tanks push through gaps. Infantry follows. Third line doesn't collapse, just dissolves. Russians retreat. Not organized withdrawal. Rout. Everyone for themselves. Third line breached in 12 minutes. 6:17 a.m. 90 minutes total. Ukrainian forces 12 kilometers beyond start line. 3 defensive lines breached. Russian front shattered. This is breakthrough. This is when exploitation begins. 47th continues advancing. Other Ukrainian units follow through gaps. Entire Russian defensive system collapses. Not just where 47th attacked, everywhere. Because breakthrough creates psychological effect. Defenders elsewhere panic. Think, if strong positions fell to Ukrainians, we can't hold either. Start retreating. Psychology becomes reality. Retreat becomes raw. Now the operational impact. What 90-minute breakthrough caused. Tactical success becomes operational disaster. 47th breakthrough wasn't just tactical victory. Created operational crisis for Russians. Ukrainian forces exploited breakthrough. Advanced 50 kilometers in 3 days. Seized dozens of towns. Threatened Izium supply routes. Russians faced choice, retreat or be encircled. Chose retreat. Abandoned Izium. Abandoned Kupiansk. Abandoned entire Kharkiv Oblast offensive positions. All because 47th broke through in 90 minutes. Tactical success cascaded into operational collapse. This is what breakthrough exploitation achieves when done correctly. Psychological collapse. Russian forces elsewhere panicked. 47th's breakthrough proved Ukrainian forces were competent. Proved Russian defenses weren't adequate. Proved that ground could be lost quickly. This psychological effect spread. Russian units that weren't attacked retreated anyway. Because if neighbors retreated, staying meant being isolated. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Psychological collapse created reality of military collapse. All started with 90-minute breakthrough. Command paralysis. Russian command couldn't respond effectively. Breakthrough was too fast. By the time commanders understood situation and ordered response, Ukrainian forces were already past third line. Reserves arrived too late. Counterattacks hit empty positions. Everything command tried to do was too slow. Ukrainian tempo exceeded Russian decision-making speed. This is a symmetry in military operations. OODA loop advantage. Observe, orient, decide, act faster than enemy and enemy can't respond effectively. 47th operated inside Russian decision cycle. By the time Russians decided what to do, situation had changed, made decisions obsolete. Force multiplier effect. 47th's success inspired other Ukrainian units, proved that breakthroughs were possible, encouraged aggressive action. This psychological effect spread through Ukrainian military. Offensive operations elsewhere intensified, not because ordered, because soldiers saw success was achievable. Morale multiplies capability. 47th's breakthrough multiplied Ukrainian effectiveness across entire front. Russians now faced enemy who believed they could win, and who had just proven it. Strategic shift. Before Kharkiv offensive, narrative was Ukraine defending. After 47th's breakthrough, narrative became Ukraine winning. International support increased. Russian domestic support wavered. Strategic situation shifted because 90-minute tactical action proved Ukrainian military could conduct offensive operations successfully. This strategic shift is still playing out. All traces back to 47th Brigade, September 7th, 90 minutes, 3 lines, breakthrough, 3 questions from the beginning, time to answer them. How did 47th penetrate 3 lines in 90 minutes? Speed, violence, coordination, combined arms integration. NATO training produced force that operated faster than Russian defenders could respond. Each line breached quickly. No pauses, momentum maintained. Russians expected time to recover. Didn't get it. Expected reinforcements. Came too late. Expected orders. Command was overwhelmed. 47th exploited every Russian weakness. Created cascading failures. 3 lines fell not because each was weak individually, but because attacking so fast defenders couldn't adapt. Why did Russian defenses collapse completely? Multiple failures. Lines were on demand. Defenders were poorly led. Communications failed under pressure. Command couldn't respond fast enough. Psychological unpreparedness for competent assault. Or combined. No single failure caused collapse. System failure. Multiple weaknesses that seemed manageable individually became catastrophic when Ukrainian forces exploited all simultaneously. This is what happens when military system has multiple problems that enemy is competent enough to exploit. What does this reveal about training asymmetry? Everything. NATO training produced Ukrainian forces capable of complex operations, combined arms coordination, initiative at junior levels, speed of execution. Soviet doctrine produced Russian forces that followed orders, defended positions, waited for instructions. When faced with situation requiring adaptation and initiative, Russian forces failed. Ukrainian forces succeeded. Gap in training quality is measured in breakthrough, speed and defensive collapse. 90 minutes proved training matters more than equipment. 47th used all Soviet vehicles, executed Western tactics, defeated Russians with newer equipment but older doctrine. The lesson from 47th's breakthrough is that speed is a weapon in itself. Fast operations overwhelm slower enemy, create confusion, force mistakes, exploit psychological effects. 47th moved faster than Russians could respond, maintained tempo that prevented Russian recovery. This tempo is product of training, doctrine, leadership. Ukrainian forces had all 3. Russian forces had positional defense doctrine designed for slow attritional warfare. When faced with fast-moving breakthrough assault, doctrine provided no answers. Defenders improvised poorly, lost quickly. This is IronBullet. We analyze battles that define wars. 47th Brigade's breakthrough defined Kharkiv offensive, proved Ukrainian forces could execute Western tactics, proved Russian defenses were vulnerable to competent assault, proved that initiative and speed defeat mass and positional defense. 90 minutes changed strategic situation. Tactical breakthrough became operational disaster for Russia, created conditions for weeks of Russian retreat. All traces to professional execution by Ukrainian forces who trained hard and fought smart. That combination is decisive in modern warfare. Subscribe to IronBullet, because in modern warfare, training determines outcomes. 47th Brigade was trained by NATO, executed breakthrough that Soviet doctrine forces couldn't. Russian defenders were trained differently, couldn't adapt when Ukrainian attack didn't match expected pattern. Gap between training standards is measured in breakthrough speed and defensive collapse. 90 minutes, 3 lines, 12 kilometers. That's what professional military training produces when applied correctly against enemy whose training is inadequate for modern warfare. 47th proved this. Russian collapse confirmed it. 90 minutes, 3 defensive lines. 2,000 Ukrainian soldiers changed strategic balance in northeast Ukraine. Breakthrough led to liberation of thousands of square kilometers. proved that Ukrainian military could win, not just defend, win attacks successfully, exploit victories. This psychological and strategic shift continues affecting war. All started September 7th, 4:47 a.m., when 47th Brigade began assault that would prove Ukrainian competence and Russian vulnerability in 90 minutes of professional military action that Soviet doctrine couldn't handle. Real battles, real tactics, real consequences. Stay informed.